What's up, everyone? It's Adar coming at you with another episode of Startup Engineering Daily. Our first story is from Aman Sanger, one of the co-founders of Cursor, and what he asks is a bit complexly worded, but I'll try to get to the bottom of it. He says, when does synchronous coding hit diminishing returns to intelligence? He believes we're a few months away from a ChatGPT model being able to do 95% of queries, even if it's like the same level intelligence. And he's saying only for like long-running tasks or things that take a while would you need smarter models, and compares it to UI work, which he says is like low intelligence and is mostly based on user intent and being able to explain the journey. So what's really cool about this, and speaks to something I was talking about with my colleague today, is what this would allow you to do as well is bring local models onto your machine, and you wouldn't have to worry about having internet. For example, like if you're on a plane, you could just run a local model, run the web locally, and just go really quick and see the changes happening in real time. And that's a piece too where it's still difficult to review UI work without a demo, and people are talking about like, can we add screenshots? I think there's a browser that does that, or some developer tool that'll like take screenshots of the web to validate it with the LLM and make sure the styles are correct. But that is a piece that still needs to be reviewed and can't just be done inside of the terminal, compared to like backend, which you can unit test and feel pretty confident that the code will be handled depending on the way it works. So here we have an announcement from Vercel that they've launched skills.sh, an open ecosystem for finding and sharing agent skills, and you can use NPX skills. I don't know how they always get these NPX names, like definitely some insider trading or something, but you can add owner/repo. I wonder if that only works with GitHub or if it works with other services, but I did try with my own skills repo and it did work, and it's cool because they have a leaderboard as well, so you can see how many times different skills have been downloaded. And we'll talk about it more in the next story, but it is interesting how much Vercel is on like the skills train right now, and skills are dope, and I do make them myself, but there is a debate happening right now of like, is it better to use MCP with auth, or is it better to use skills with a CLI that you ship like as a company? So it's being debated. I'm kind of working on something where I have to decide one way or the other, but I've used the Jira MCP, and I'm just such a big fan of that workflow that I feel like MCP makes a lot of sense. But if they did have a CLI that was good, I guess it would make sense to also use that. But like the MCP with OAuth is definitely a really solid flow, and like you need to auth at some point. So as long as it's just a browser open, you enter your credentials, you approve the projects you need to control, and then it closes and you can start working with it, and it's super flawless. Like I hated working with Confluence before MCP, but now it's like so easy to use. It knows exactly where to put the files and all that. Like LLMs are like the ultimate organizers. It's super unreal. So here, kind of relating to the last story, we have Aiden Bai, who is the creator of Million.js, which just like made performance better. He also has, I guess, this company Ami.dev for, I think, vibe coding essentially. And he also had like React Scan, I believe was also created by him. But he's asking, why do we need MCP if skills exist now? We were kind of talking about that earlier, but essentially skills are markdown files that the LLMs can call when they feel they need to execute something, like some action usually. Within those files, they can see like, okay, here's the CLI commands I need to run. Here's like some general skills or general ideas about the service that I'm interacting with and how to use it. And it's essentially a system prompt that you get access to only when you need to interact with that service, because we're trying to get rid of all the static context that we had in these big files and just only access the dynamic context when we need to operate on it. And skills are kind of one of the solutions we have right now. And we have a couple interesting replies, one from David Kramer, the CTO of Sentry, saying, Aiden, don't be one of those guys. And he says MCPs provide an abstraction layer for tools. Skills provide a prompt template. They're independent concerns. And I agree with that. I think you do want to have a skill that explains like, how do you operate this service, or what are some key practices or best practices to operate within this service. But then from the MCP side, you do have these standardized signatures for the functions and the tools that can be called. And the LLMs have gotten so much better at using MCPs. I remember I did a hackathon for them like 3 to 6 months ago, and I was still super new to MCPs at that point and didn't really have much experience, but it felt like they didn't really work that well, or there just wasn't that much being exposed. But now, like especially with the Jira and the Confluence one, it just works so well. It really blows my mind. And then Lee Rob also says there's a lot of helpful data behind auth. MCP gives agents access to that data. And he says Sentry and Datadog as examples, but people did reply to him and say, if you have a CLI, then you can auth the CLI as well. Like at some point you do need to manually intervene, type in the password, do the passkey or whatever, but you can use a CLI for auth and you can use an MCP for auth. So skills are kind of more, I think, towards what David's saying, where it's a prompt template to be used for the MCP tools. Next, we have a tweet from Chris Park, who's an engineer at X working on the X API and X developers, and he actually announced that instead of having to pay for $5,000 a month to access the X API, they are launching a pay-per-usage API to general availability imminently. Already available as a soft launch. I guess you can reach out to him if you want access. I feel like back in the day, there were so many ideas we had where it's like, create a news aggregator or create some like AI summarization of tweets. But off the top of my head right now, I can't really think of anything I would want to use the Twitter API for or spend money. I guess we'll have to take a look at the costs when they release the pay per usage, and maybe it'll be like on the lines of tokens, like $15 per million or something. And also maybe tying it to like the Grok API could be very interesting as well. But right now, I don't really see any projects I would use for it. Maybe some kind of Twitter marketing for posting. I'm not sure how that would work with pay per usage, because I know like reading and querying and taking that data to train on AI was a big concern of theirs when they made it $5,000 a month. So we'll have to see what that looks like when it's launched. Here we have Dax talking about some security advisories that were filed on OpenCode, I presume. He said they were all clearly AI generated, and it gets in the way of them responding to actually valid reports that are made by people who understand our project. And he's saying this in response to Curl closing their HackerOne bug bounty program because of AI trash. And it's very interesting. We've talked about this a few times, a few stories over the past week or so, because I know TL Draw removed external contributions even though they're not fully open source. But it is a problem. I don't have this problem because I don't really run any open source projects. And also, even before AI, there were people that would do slop PR, like that one YouTube tutorial that told you to make a README on Express, and then they had thousands of READMEs. I think that might have been post AI, but it wasn't like AI is today. So it's easy to say that this could be an overreaction, but at the end of the day, it's still just GitHub not having good UX for reviews. People said they have tried to fix it. I think even GitHub has said they're going to try to fix it, but nothing's been released yet. But essentially, my understanding is the main thing people want is you just need to be like a trusted user to have higher level PR, so then you can ignore all of the trash. Maybe similar to like an Instagram DM situation where you have like these hidden DMs that don't matter, but the ones that actually are important or people you care about show up at the top. So I think that's the main thing people are requesting, but there may be more features that I'm not aware of. And the last story is that Tuomas, I guess is how you say his name, co-founder of Linear, is announcing that code reviews are coming to Linear. Linear is a project management software. It's like the new age Jira. Very cool from what I've heard. I've used it like testing a couple times, but I've never used it long term on any projects. But I know that they've added a lot of features since I last tried it, like such as docs. But what's very interesting is that they added a code review tool. It's not actually out yet. It's waitlisted for early access, but it will let you review PRs within Linear. And it says it's two-way synced with GitHub, which is very interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot because I do think that code review is one of the synchronous pieces of development where you can't push without a human checking the code and approving it just for like liability purposes. I'm not sure if that's going to change or how my thoughts on that might evolve. But for now, I really think like since the code can be generated so quickly with the models, that code review kind of becomes practical again, as opposed to like, I feel that in startups, we've just been pushing stuff forever, and like you review big things, but people kind of have the freedom to push things and own the code that they're pushing and make sure that it works. But now with the velocity that's coming from these models, I think that PR review has become even more important and is kind of expected at all levels of organizations at this point, beyond like one person, which might also kind of speak to like the one person unicorn, and when that's going to happen, per Sam Altman. But yeah, I think the GitHub PR review is not that good. I'm not sure if they've updated it. I think they have a little bit. And it's not horrible, but I do think there is a future where we can review PRs much better. And it's interesting that they went two ways with GitHub, because I think people just aren't going to be able to leave GitHub at this point from a code perspective, from a PR perspective. But it will be interesting to look towards the future to see if these platforms start to own the code more, like Graphite, for example. If this kind of stuff interests you and you want to talk with some like-minded people, join the Audinato Discord in the description. Thanks.